Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this panel session of the LIAMforum called Water, Nature, and Us in Search for a Better World. My name is Julia Baird. I am a professor and a Canada Research Chair at Brock University with a focus on water research and on agriculture. And so I'm very pleased to be able to be a part of this session, which connects very nicely to my own research interests. And as a professor, we're very interested in supporting the next generation and their training in order to go out into the world and do good. So my role as a moderator is to facilitate this panel, and I'm very pleased to be able to do so. I'll give you some of the housekeeping stuff in a second, but before we do that, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am attending this session today from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples. And I'd invite you to reflect on whose traditional territory you may be joining us from today. So the format of the panel is such that we're going to leave a lot of time for questions, recognizing that the interaction with audience as much as we can in this format is important. So the panelists will introduce themselves briefly, approximately 5 minutes each. And then after that, we're going to open things up for questions. So I'd encourage you to think about that as you're listening to the panelist introductions, the sorts of questions you might have. And please don't be shy about asking the question. The place to do that is in the Q&A box in the online system that you're in. Hopefully that's very easy for you to find. There's just, at least for me, it's along the right-hand side. Attendee Hub, thank you for the right language there. And I will receive your questions. I will approve them as they come in, as long as they're appropriate. No foul language, please. And then I can pose those questions to the panelists. So you can ask questions anytime, and I will attend to as many as I can, and look forward to receiving those. I think we all do. So without a lot of waiting, I think we're going to get started with the panelist introduction. So we're going to go in the following order. We'll start with Ann Middleton, then we'll go to Raymond Philippe, and then Seth Mueller. So Ann, please introduce yourself.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'm excited to be here today. And I'd like to follow along and acknowledge that I'm with EDI Environmental Dynamics, and our office here in Burnaby is on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. So yeah, I'm going to do a little introduction to myself. And for those of you, I had the honor of speaking on the panel earlier this week on women in STEM. So some of you may have heard me speak already. But today I'll do a little bit of a longer introduction, and there'll be hopefully a few little details in there that I didn't reveal before. So I'm currently a senior water resources scientist with EDI Environmental Dynamics. It's a biology-based company here in Western Canada. I'm a technical lead for hydrogeology and hydrology across the company. So a little bit about how I got here, and I'm hoping to share my passion for water resources, and that'll come through in kind of my meandering path that got me here. I grew up in a remote fishing lodge in north central BC, 100 miles from the nearest community. So I got a very unique upbringing there. I did distance education, which I think is something that not a lot of people, I don't run into a lot of people like myself who've lived in Northern Canada and come forth and been able to go out and do the kind of work that I do. So hopefully if there's anybody in the audience that has those kinds of experiences, they can see that path forward. Through my experiences working or living in the fishing lodge, obviously I grew up with a great interest and curiosity in nature and in the environment around me, as well as my parents were quite outspoken in environmental matters. We also had a fish forestry interaction project nearby to us. So a lot of the researchers and people from the universities and Department of Fisheries and Oceans stayed at our fishing lodge, and I got to know them, and they would come and they would take me out in the field with them at a very young age. And so I got opportunities to go out and learn all sorts of things that a lot of people rarely get those opportunities. So that was kind of what got me started and really got me fired up with being surrounded by these high-level scientists who would have these conversations with me. From there, I wanted to go, and I thought that I was going to become a fish biologist researching sockeye salmon. When I was in my teenage years, you couldn't have told me differently. That's what I was going to do. So I went merrily off to university to go do this. And when I got there, I realized that job prospects and other things weren't quite what I expected. The university presented a world of opportunities of different courses for me to try and to take. I did some philosophy, I did economics, I even did organic chemistry. And all of these things, all of these courses have come to, there's not a single course I took that didn't come to play in my career. So that's one of the things, is every one of my experiences has contributed to what I've done now. I did my undergrad, ended up doing my undergrad in earth sciences, so undergrad in geology, and extended minors in geography and biology. So, you know, I'm a generalist along the way. I went out from there to get, well, in my first year at university, I met a TA who started telling me about his research on groundwater and how it fed salmon streams. And it was a compensation project for a hydro project in BC. And then all of a sudden I started to open up a new world of opportunity of how water started to intersect my passion for fish. And that kind of took me down a completely different pathway. And I ended up doing my honors in hydrogeology, looking at water issues, groundwater, surface water issues, and looking at streams that support endangered populations of endangered fish here in British Columbia. From there, I went out and I started working in contaminated site work, which is kind of the bread and butter for a lot of hydrogeologists. I got some experience working in Fort McMurray. After that, because I had this passion for the fish aspect of stuff, my undergrad supervisor helped me get funding to do a PhD in groundwater surface water interactions, looking at water quantity and implications for fish habitat. So she always just referred to it as, she was like, I'll supervise the groundwater parts, you deal with the fishy bits yourself. And so it was great. And I appreciate, I'm forever grateful having a supervisor that was open to the idea of helping me, spending years finding funding for a project that was like that. And so went from there to back to contaminated site work. I worked on a lot of very diverse projects, not necessarily the gas stations. I worked on salt contamination and complex industrial sites and things like that. So a lot of complex geology and geochemistry. And from there, and recently during the pandemic, I had an opportunity to come to where I am now, which is for this biology-based company, and really started to figure out that I think this is what I was looking for all these years. I say that now, but in a few years, who knows, what will come. But I have an opportunity now to work in consulting in a place where I have opportunities to use my thesis, which is remarkable and exciting. Very few people, I think, can say that they can go out every day and apply their research at that level. Working on innovative projects with really progressive clients, making a difference in terms of, educating people on the importance of groundwater, clients, communities, those sorts of things, and the understanding of groundwater, surface water, as well as contributing to, I think what's really important for environmental sustainability, baseline projects, working towards long-term closure plans for mine sites, those sorts of things, and really being able to apply what I've learned over the years in water. So now I'm a technical lead growing a water resources team, and I guess I'll just throw in one little nugget of information that's kind of interesting. I'm also a nationally ranked competitive powerlifter in Canada. So I will throw that in just to make sure people are paying attention, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that was a curveball at the end there, Marianne. Thank you. And congratulations. That's an amazing accomplishment. Okay, we're going to turn it over to Raymond next.
Thanks, Julia. I'm not sure if I can cope with that curveball there. Okay, a bit of an introduction from my side. My name is Raymond Philippe, originally from the Netherlands. I started studying chemical engineering, first at Delft University of Technology. I never finished that one. It was 3-4 years in, and then I decided to change. I thought I didn't see my future as working in the chemical industry in the Netherlands in a single factory, and I didn't project myself in that. And that's where I came across mining engineering, and that with the adventure idea of going abroad. So that's really appealed to me. That's why I changed. And also because I saw an opportunity there to pick up on something that I missed from chemical engineering, and that was really metal chemistry. So I did mining and mineral processing in Delft University of Technology, finished my studies, and took a plane to South America, to Chile. That was in the late 90s when we had the big Asian crisis. And basically I got there in Chile without a job, and there was basically no work available either. So I did decide that I was going to stay in Chile. I wanted to build my future there in mining industry as well. So I first did a follow-up study on in 1 year environmental engineering at one of the universities in Chile to pick up on Spanish, and also to get a better view of what was going on there locally, and also to get a more recognition of what I had as a study in Chile. From there on, my career took off a bit. And I did just a recount of the amount of positions I held and the amount of companies I was involved in since then. And I came to 12 companies owned with a headquarters located in 5 continents. So there was a bit of a cultural experience there, from big companies, small companies, and all kinds of roles. I've done process engineering, I've done sales engineering, product management, and then what I think was when I really started to go focus really on water. I was already much involved in water with equipment sales and spare parts sales and corrosion management and all that in mining. But really I started with a water treatment company with its own technology. And from there, I went into consulting and engineering. I held several roles with several major engineering companies, all out of Chile, and overseeing projects mostly in South America. And that's also when I think the whole boom of water in the mining industry started taking place. Especially in Chile with a lot of drought going on. That was when the whole desalination boom came up. So several of the mining companies have built now their own desalination plant plus pipelines. And that was I think a growing experience for a lot of people in understanding the size of these kind of projects and how to build them. There was no specific experience from other places. So I've had the opportunity to work on that. Before that, I was on the effluent discharge side, and that's also when I got involved in the water management in the mining processing plants as well. And then so the whole more holistic view of things. Then water as a risk factor for business, water as an ESG risk factor. Climate change came into place there as well. So the overall the view on water got bigger, and people higher up in all the organizations were much more involved, and that's how I rolled also into my current position with a relatively young company, and relatively small still, but growing, where I'm leading the water research development of different mining operations companies in globally, and to see the metrics around water withdrawal, water consumption, and how the different companies and different operations compare to each other, and what the impacts are for other people associated to that. So the finance sector, because they need now data as well on water, where they are investing their money in. The view has become more holistic, I would say, and less technical. Although the technical background from my early years is still very handy, and also the contacts. It's a very contact business. I think that's looking back, it sounds like everything I've done so far were all aligned with the position where I'm now. I don't think that at that time anybody could predict where this was going to. So also following on what Marianne said, I'm not sure where we'll be in 5 or 10 years from now. Probably not powerlifting. That's the curve. What I do like a lot, and I'm also a big thing, as water is that broad of a subject, and there are so many organizations around water and stakeholders around water, it means also that there is a lot to be learned between the different specializations, and there is a lot of opportunity to educate people of the different subjects out there, and the mentoring of that's something I've liked a lot during my career in taking in junior engineers, junior scientists, and educating them and bringing up to speed with what's going on. That's what I have so far.
That's great. Thank you, Raymond. I will turn it over now to Seth.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. This is a pretty interesting experience, and I hope everybody enjoys it. About me, right now, I am living in northern Sweden, about, see, I calculated today, 150 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. In a town called Skellefteå, I work for a company called Boliden Mineral AB. I work in the mining sector of that company. Boliden has both mines and smelters, so we do the full metals chain from exploration all the way through smelting and delivering a metal product out to our customers. I've been living here for about 12 years, and my job, as it's titled now, is a specialist engineer in the sustainability department in the sub-department of waste and water management. I work on projects across the board, very similar to what Raymond has said. I do everything from baseline studies. I look at water management. I'm doing a lot of work now with our company's water stewardship broadly and water stewardship within our mining side. So 5 to 7 different mining operations and a bunch of legacy mine sites that we have to look after. How we consider things like climate change, flooding, other risk management, and how we actually even communicate with stakeholders around us. So the people that use the water outside of our mining operations, be it fishing, recreation, native people, which in northern Sweden, maybe folks don't really know. There's Sami, which is essentially the native people that have been roaming up here for thousands of years and have free right to traverse the land as primarily reindeer herders from Norway all the way into Russia. So there's different challenges with that as well. And then obviously there's more and more growing interest and pressure, especially with climate change and other things happening, to be good stewards of our water. And I think that's sort of where everyone is. Now, how did I get here? Well, I wouldn't say that I was thinking about that when my career started in looking at earth sciences or anything like that years and years ago. I probably got interested in geology and or earth science when I was young. My parents I grew up on the East Coast of the United States. My parents were not from there, or from Montana and New Mexico. So that meant every 4 or 5 years, we might take a trip, and that trip might be someplace really beautiful. At least I thought so, with mountains, canyons, rivers, waterfalls, etc. And I thought that was cool. And somewhere about the same time, I also decided that I didn't want to work in a job where I always had to wear a suit and tie. So those things went together nicely, and I eventually ended up at school in Colorado. I did my undergraduate degree there in geology and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I was finishing that degree up. And I had some good mentors, some good teachers that I got along, professors that I got along well with. And they said, well, Seth, the U.S. Geological Survey has an option here to look at geochemistry and groundwater and surface water in Alaska. And I said, well, Alaska sounds cool. So I was working in Denver, Colorado, and commuting my summers in Alaska, where I got to work together with people from Australia and people from Canada, and went back and forth over the border in Canada and thought that was cool. And then after a while, I decided, well, after I got my master's degree, I stayed on at the U.S. Geological Survey for a while, working on research projects, looking at all sorts of different questions that in the end were all environmental and all related to water, even if I didn't really understand that at the time. And then I took a little break from that and I went into exploration, more geology, different stuff. And then I got a job as a consultant again from Denver, and that's where things started to go around the world. So my first job as a consultant was working on a mine in Indonesia, looking at just a water question related to climate and flooding and discharges from the mining operation. And I thought that was pretty cool. And it wasn't long after that that I was involved in projects in Mexico and South America. And eventually I moved down to Tucson, Arizona, and worked there for a while, going oftentimes back and forth between there and Mexico. And then I picked up stakes and moved down to Santiago, Chile, and worked out of Chile on projects in Chile, Argentina, and Peru. And after a couple of years as a consultant in that role, I decided I wanted more industry experience. And I actually got offered a job in Boliden as an exploration geologist or in the environmental department. And I said, well, I've had the most experience in environmental department. It sounds like they have some really big challenges. So I'll take the environmental department. So that's how I ended up here. But along the way, it was also because of mountains, climbing, skiing, fishing, outdoor pursuits, good friends that I've met along the way. So at no point in time would I would say that I had planned on doing what I was doing. It's more that I found a way into doing what I was doing. So I won't take up the time for questions because I think this is going to be pretty interesting. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Seth, and thanks to all of the panelists for introducing yourselves and the winding pathways that took you to where you are now, and also recognizing that this is not the end. Our pathways continue. I don't see any questions yet. Maybe just while we're waiting for those questions to come in, and I would encourage the audience to ask your questions. Otherwise, I'm going to ask my questions, and they may not be the things that you're most interested in. So, but what I hear a lot is the influence of kind of your early years, developmental years, on your kind of these enduring interests, and that these interests come into play and can affect our decisions much further down the line. And I heard that at least from a couple of the panelists, and certainly my own experience reflects that. I grew up on a farm in Manitoba, which is the prairies in Canada, for those of you who might be attending from outside of Canada. And did not enjoy the farm as a child. I wanted to be in town where all my friends were. But now, I mean, and even in my 20s, as I grew up a bit, realized how important that kind of rural lifestyle and opportunity to grow up in that place, how special that was, how important agriculture is, and the critical role that agriculture and kind of how it intersects with water. And that has endured throughout my entire career and continues to, and I don't see that that influence changing anytime soon. So it's really nice to hear that others have had those same sorts of influences endure over time. Okay. Maybe one of the questions that we can start with is, a couple of you mentioned in various ways that the focus in your industry is becoming more holistic over time. And I'm wondering what sorts of implications that has for the sorts of jobs that will be available in these various kind of resource based industries in the next 5 to 10 years, or if you even want to, venture to speculate further than that. Yeah, and I'll just open that up to whoever has a comment.
If I may, I think I mentioned it at least. Holistic, I would say there has been a change in at least in the mining sector, but I think it's broader than the mining sector in the sense that traditionally all developments, or a lot of developments, was very silo based, wherein per discipline, per mechanical engineer would look at something and would projects, for example, there would not be too much interaction between a mechanical engineer and a social specialist, for example. Whereas what I've seen now, for example, the selection for a pump in a certain location might have a social impact because of sounds, because of the views that you might, or the interaction with the environment, and those the people that are more sensitive to those different interactions from different areas, I think those would be the people that have more potential in getting into this new water discipline, as I see it. It's something probably that you would have to develop more yourself than that there is a tradition of passing the information of what the methodology always has been, because there is a need for change, a different view on the way things are to be developed. That's a general view. I think, at least talking for myself, my generation, and probably a bit older as well, a more traditional way of developing things and not taking always into account things that the newer generations have much more feeling for. I think that's a very good development, and that would be welcoming for the whole sector.
Yeah, I think I'll take off from what Raymond said, in that even today, what we're seeing is the need for and the slow progression of building of very, very diverse groups within working groups. So when we're problem solving, because that's essentially what we're doing, we're problem solving and de-risking. We have groups where we have engineers, we have computer scientists, we have biologists, we have social scientists, we have lawyers, we have human rights lawyers, we have geologists, accountants, all in the same project and all having this discussions. And I think that's actually one of the coolest things about this, is that one of those things that I've had the experience of being part of on my journey is that it doesn't matter as long as you're interested. So, hey, you might not have studied earth science in the beginning, and you might not even be that interested, but you could come across a problem where you could say, hey, what I'm doing is actually applicable. I'm getting in, theoretically, you could get into machine learning, and then you have a very, very interesting toolbox behind you, or artificial intelligence, to put those tools to use solving problems. And that's where these sort of cross-disciplinary problems like water, where we are crossing many, many, many disciplines within the mining industry. And I think it's important to point out, especially with mining, is it's everything from process supply water in order to actually extract the minerals, dewatering to keep the open pit or underground dry so that you can mine. And then all that water has to move around site, and you have water that comes in contact with mine rocks, with mine tailings from the processing. So there's a lot of work that has to be done about moving it around, and you're actually coupling all these things together. And it's pretty cool when you meet somebody that wasn't initially involved in that chain, and they all of a sudden find themselves in there and find it very interesting. So I think it's really, there's a lot of opportunity to come into the water space across mining industry, but even across all industries, with different talent sets, as long as you're interested in and trying to problem solve and help out.
And I think I'd continue following that up and take that a step further, because it's also in terms of opportunities, in terms of being able to communicate that externally as well. It's important to engage communities. It's important to be able to communicate that across teams, to regulators, to people, take the information from outside your team. So you have that interdisciplinary interest and that ability to communicate, I think there's a lot of opportunities there as well to be contributing to the team, to the problem solving, but not just on the technical side, but on the communication side too.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I think that there's a lot of richness there in those answers, and I appreciate your responses. We've got a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm going to flip to those. The first one is, I'm just going to read it verbatim. Water is a huge issue, but what do you consider to be the greatest threats globally, and what possible solutions are there? So, you know, a small question for you all to ponder. It's a great question. It is, I mean, it is the question, right? So maybe, you know, you can take a piece of it, and I will just open it up again for whoever feels brave enough to go first on that one.
Yeah. The thing about water, even if it's a global problem, but water is a very local issue. So it's an enormous amount of local issues. And if you compare that, for example, with everything that's going on with the greenhouse gases and the climate change associated to that and net zero, in water it doesn't work like that. Basically, because where you have where there is a lack of water, at the end that goes in hand with an excess of water somewhere else. I would say the biggest challenge around water is the understanding of that and how to connect that local issue globally, and to understand the aggregates and how to manage the aggregate there. It's a bottom-up approach and not a top-down approach.
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. Dr. Marianne.
Yeah, sure. I'll hop in on that one. I would agree. That's exactly the situation. It makes it a little bit difficult because of that. Saying it, you could always say that globally there are certain questions. Access to clean water, for example, for drinking water. That's not a problem everywhere, but it is a problem, and it's a problem over large stretches of the world. But Raymond's absolutely right when he says that it's very, very local. But what I think is interesting is that everybody's saying, okay, well, it's local to me and this is my problem, but there are other places in the world where it's the same problem. And by doing that, you open up the ability to work together on problems over the world, and that kind of cooperation is actually happening between industry and NGOs and governments across the world now, where everybody's saying, well, we don't know necessarily how to solve our problem, and what we're doing is putting it up there. So I think one of the solutions that we're talking about is sharing of knowledge, and creating groups where you can freely discuss these kind of questions and pursue research or pursue different approaches to get at the root of these problems.
Yeah, I think, Seth, you kind of jumped right on where I was going to say. I don't have the global experience, but from looking at issues in Canada, we have transboundary aquifer issues, we have regional differences, and a lot of challenges within Canada, where we have, you know, Indigenous governance at play. We have a lot of different interest groups, and knowledge sharing is a big piece of it. There's been some big pushes to make data more transparent, more accessible, publicly available. I think understanding the problem is the first step towards this, and that comes from the data. And if it's siloed too much, we're just not building that knowledge, or we're reinventing the wheel and spending money and asking people and organizations and groups like Indigenous governance to try and spend their money to do stuff that's already been done in like the next watershed over. So I think that collaborative effort is where a lot of this is going to go, because, you know, when I think about groundwater, it doesn't follow catchments, it doesn't follow a stream flow. You know, these are bigger pictures, but not so big that it's necessarily global.
Thanks, everyone. Great perspective. And we've got one more question from the audience so far, but I would encourage more people to keep asking those questions. And we'll address this one. So one of the things that you all talked about was that you have these kind of pathways that led through, from education through to various, industry, consulting, other sorts of roles. And there's been a lot of them. But if we think back to where, it first started, the question here is, how does one find out about job or internship opportunities in the water field? So, thinking back to those very early days, or what, and also what now about people who are coming into kind of entry-level jobs. How would you go about doing that? And are you mentoring?
I can jump in on that one first, because I am mentoring. So within the organizations I'm involved in Canada, there's the Canada Water Resources Association. They run national mentorship programs, so we're always looking for more participants. They just opened up for the fall. So I think if you're willing to and able to get out to those types of, they're virtual, so it makes it easily accessible. I would say it's about the networking, putting yourself out there, and it can be a little bit scary and intimidating sometimes, but I mean, everybody that you're talking to, we're just people, and most people are there wanting to help. So if you're at conferences, asking questions, sending messages. I do a lot of my networking on LinkedIn. So I built my network. The key there is I try to share information as well. I'm not just there to take information from people. I share what I'm interested in. I share articles. I share things that are interesting, and try to build that trust between myself and the people I'm interacting with. So yeah, I would say for the most part, it's getting out there and just asking questions, asking people, if there's somebody who is in a job that I really admire, I wouldn't be so shy as to ask them, send them a message and say, hey, I think that's a really neat job you did. What got you there? Or what's your piece of advice? Or what do you think is the skill that is needed? And from there, you'll start to get a picture.
If I may there, I think what you probably have heard from all of us, that the steps that we've taken to come to the position where we are now, that has not always been very smooth. There are some major steps in between, and maybe even across sector changes there. So if you're interested in working in the mining space, that's not necessarily working with a mining company. It can be also a technology supplier or a reagent supplier that works in the mining space, or it can be an NGO that works also in that area, or with the authorities that oversee the mining space, especially last 10-15 years, with this requirement for knowledge from this more holistic view. There's a lot of people moving from one sector to another, but at the end working in the same space, and I think that's also a potential of creating your career path.
Well, I guess it's my turn. In terms of finding something in the water space, I would agree that, okay, now you've got all of us contacts, so you can always find us on LinkedIn or via this website, and get in touch with us and see if we have any opportunities. I have mentored before. I'm not currently mentoring anybody, but I would absolutely recommend contacting the US Geological Survey, Canadian Geological Survey. Mining companies oftentimes have summer opportunities for people to come in and learn and work. So there's always opportunities in industry, and I think you'll find that even across the board, almost all industries have some sort of a connection to water, and now it's becoming a topic, as well as everybody's acknowledging there's a generational shift in a lot of these industries. So there are opportunities to come in where people are actively searching for young people, students, etc., to come in and get some work experience. So the opportunities are out there. You just have to knock on the door a little bit and scratch around and think about what you might want to do. And don't be shy about contacting people and asking.
And I might just add something from the academic perspective here as well. Personally, I love to have students ask questions about what we know about job opportunities out there, or even, I guess within the university. And often we're connected to, outside of our ivory tower as well. My work is very much, I guess what we would call transdisciplinary, which means that my research just includes others that aren't academics, and kind of defining what the problem is and what sort of research approach we're going to take to solve it. So I work with a lot of different organizations and governments in my research, and have a lot of connections, and I anticipate I'm not the only prof out there that is like that. And so, if you are a student, profs are an underutilized resource when it comes to thinking about what happens after university. Of course, universities have offices that can help you prepare for what comes next, and connect you as well. But I'd encourage you to, if you have a prof of a class that you're quite interested in, or if you're a grad student or you're being supervised by somebody, or have a faculty member you admire their work, reach out to them. Again, we love to help make those connections and get good people into those sorts of jobs. So yeah, cast a wide net, I guess, is the overall theme of that. And don't be shy, because people are okay with you reaching out.
And another suggestion, and my experience has been as well, that a lot of people only try to connect through the human resource department of companies, and they not necessarily are always the people that have all the updated information on the requirements. So if you're interested in water, try to find who in a certain company that has something to do with water, and approach them directly. And I think that's another opportunity.
Yeah, that's a good point, Raymond. Thank you. All right, I'm going to do another check here. We don't have any more questions.
While you're checking, I was also going to say, to follow up on that, to make sure that you're telling people that you're interested. So a lot of companies and places now have recruitment bonuses. So the person who's working at the company, if they know you, can get a bonus if they're recruiting good people, because HR departments also rely on their staff to help draw in good people. So let it be known, and talk about what you're interested in.
Great, thanks, Marianne. That just prompted me to think of another thing. We'll just keep this going. Alumni networks. So whether you went to high school with somebody who's working in a company now that you're interested in, or you went to university with somebody, or you are going to university, the same university as somebody who's in a role, that's a point of connection. If you've met them or know them a little bit, even better. But often, if you can flag something like, hey, I did the same degree, just I'm 10 years behind you or something, that's another nice way to make it a bit of a warmer connection too. But all of it requires a bit of work. Like, I think, you have to do a bit of, put yourself out there a bit. Okay, give me one sec here while I review there's a question here. I'm just going to take a quick peek at it. Okay, let me just approve that. Feel very powerful. I have the deciding power. Okay, here we go. It says, in Sweden, a growing problem is that no water body, and then in brackets, any type, question mark, can be influenced by big industries such as mining due to the EU limiting production. What do you think about legislations and how far they should be taking limitations? So maybe we'll start with Seth, since you are in Sweden, if you want to make some comments on that.
It's a difficult question to answer. I'm going to try and be as absolutely as political as possible. The reality is that somewhere we have to strike a balance between our ability to produce products that we need, that we use every day. And one of the big ones now that you'll see often mining companies getting involved with is the electrification of everything. So moving towards battery industry, moving away from fossil fuels, et cetera. And the reality is that we need metals to produce things that we use. But at the same time, we have to be good stewards of water. We have to protect. I think the reality is that from our perspective, or if I can speak broadly, what we really want to see is science-based regulations. And what that means is that everybody's as in agreement as possible over the science has been done to come up with that regulation. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes it becomes a little bit more arbitrary. Sometimes there's regulations that are developed on a larger scale that are applied that don't really make sense in some countries, or especially within the EU itself, are interpreted very differently between the different EU member states. So I think there's absolutely some work to be done there, just as much as there's work to be done on our side to make sure that we're doing all we can to protect those resources.
Thanks. Does anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, it has to do with the whole not in my backyard's view of not acknowledging effectively what Seth mentions, that on one side you do want to have access to certain materials to develop your economy, or to develop to do what you want, but on the other side you don't want the potential negative effects of that close to home. And with that view, you're going against at the end of what were the other questions that we had. So what does this do on a global basis? And probably what you see then is that you, in a country like Sweden, you potentially have better opportunities to be better stewards on water than a lot of other countries where mining takes place, but at a much higher social or environmental cost. But as it is not specifically located next to your back door, it's more accepted. And I think that's one of the views that has to change. The problem there is, as long as local politics is very much dependent on local votes, it's the pressure that they are receiving to make that change is not really present.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. I'm cognizant that we have about 3 minutes till the end of this panel. And so I guess the last question I will ask of you, with maybe 1 minute each or less, is there any final bit of advice that you would like to send out there to the audience who might be considering a role similar to yours, or in the industry that you work in? Beyond what you've already provided very kindly. And maybe we'll go in the same order we started, and so Mariana may put you on the spot.
I made some notes up on what you had kind of thought about experience needed in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm going to draw from my notes on that. And there's been a lot of talk recently in these forums as well, broadly on things like AI. I see a lot of people talking about modeling, about that aspect of the career. And there certainly is a lot of skills and a lot of opportunities there. But I would caution that there's a lot of things that we still don't know about water. We think about hydrology and hydrogeology, about what it does on the ground. And so I think that don't write off the need to be going out and looking at field positions and the opportunities that are presented by going out and getting that physical understanding of what is happening on the ground with the water, and bring that back to be able to feed that into the models and everything. But right now I'm seeing a big gap in that skill set. And I think that the opportunities there will be abound for quite some time if you can go out and help build that knowledge.
I have to hop in now because I'm in 100% agreement with you. I don't think anybody should be discouraged that, and I'll be completely honest about this, I was not the best mathematics, chemistry student, whatever, but when I applied it to problem solving in geology, all of a sudden I understood the things that I did very poorly in. to some respects in high school and university. But the one thing that I've always had in my career is that boots on the ground. In other words, you've got to be out looking at the problem, understanding the problem, working with the people who are helping you. So even if you say, well, I'm not really a science person, and I'm not really into modeling, and I'm not really into working social aspects, that we still need people out there to run drill rigs. We still need people out there to run heavy equipment. And if you're interested in these kind of questions around water, there's always opportunity for you to work in those areas because you always need that kind of support. So there's a lot broader skill set than one might think. We don't all have to be scientists to get involved in this. We all don't have to be politicians to get involved in this. There's really critical roles all the way through, plumbers, drillers, geologists, water samplers, people that work in labs, people that build groundwater measurement instruments, etc. So I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to this. So keep an open mind and ask questions.
All right, I've received the note that we're out of time. Sorry, Raymond. You'll have to reach out to Raymond for his final bit of advice. I want to thank all of the panelists for taking the time to be here today, sharing your experiences, your expertise, and I hope as an audience you've taken a lot away from it. I know I have. And so thanks again, and great to get to know all of you. Take care.